obviously God was working in the scene before the foundation of the earth, and he used everything in my life to call me into missions. The right family, the right interests, studying Spanish as an 11-year-old on forward. And it really came into my understanding when I became a Christian at First Presbyterian Church and went to my first missions conference. It was like, wow, yeah, I want to know more about this. And from that point forward, we worked on getting me into missions. One Sunday when I was walking through the Hall of Nations and I saw 120 missionaries on the wall, I got really excited. This sense of, this is for me. I was briefed to have no expectations, and you wonder how you are going to empty your mind and your heart of all that. But I fully expected God to go before me and make everything clear and plain. I'd never been to Monterey, I'd never been a missionary, and I didn't know any of the people I was going to work with. So I just stepped right into it, as blank a slate as I could possibly be. I remember distinctly that one time the Kyles came up from Mexico City on their way north, and they stayed overnight at Watanabe's, and we went to the movies. It happened to be the movie Independence Day. So we were with English-speaking Americans in a movie about an American holiday. And when I stepped out of that scene into Mexico again, it was like, whoa, where am I? My first assignment was in Monterey, and I was the only other missionary at that point besides the Watanabes. And so I assisted Gary in everything he could do in terms of stimulating and mentoring and equipping the church planters to understand what our church planting efforts would look like. That meant I worked with the women. I started a little newsletter that went from to the Mexican church planters, and I helped with short-term teams that came down to get to know us, and started developing relationships with the churches in Monterey. The most difficult part of adapting to the culture for me was being a morning person in a nighttime culture. Lots of times, the Mexicans work long days and often get off work at about 7. And that means they run home, they shower, they come to Bible studies at 8 o'clock or even 8:30 at night. And by then I'm kind of worn out. And supper to follow. So lots of times the evenings went till 10:30, 11 o'clock at night just for a Bible study. The same was happening with seminary classes, ran from 7 till 10, with oftentimes question and answer and dealing with confusion until 11 o'clock at night. So that was my biggest challenge culturally. My biggest challenge in entering the Mexican culture, I think, was dealing with my personality as an introvert in an extrovert culture. There's a lot of where am I? Just the significance of social interaction and face-to-face contact pressed me into learning how to be more of an extrovert, and also learning to protect my quieter side that some of you don't even know, with more time with God and in prayer and protecting my quiet side. Actually, I pulled out of my Bible my mission statement. I have it on this card. It is Psalm 51, 10 through 13. I wrote this card in April of 1991. which was only 18 months after I came to Christ. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit in me. I knew first I had to be faithful to God and always seek Him, and that He would be working in me to cleanse my heart. Do not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. I knew that I couldn't do this without the Holy Spirit and His work in me, that God had to be present in every step that I took. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. And this has been a really important portion in the longevity. Staying 25 years in Mexico has not been easy, and I've had my ups and downs, but God was also always the source of the joy that came with my salvation. He was the source of giving me a willing spirit, and that in itself could sustain me for those 25 years. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners will turn back to you. The important thing was that my testimony of Jesus Christ couldn't be realized fully unless those prior three things happened. Then I could teach transgressors his ways, and sinners have turned back to him. The big one that caused a change in my direction was when I got sick. After 10 years of serving with all my heart and soul and mind and strength, my body kind of gave out. And in the thick of it, I really thought that my missionary service was over. But God started redirecting my involvement by giving the Northern Mexican church planting movement another person who would work with women. That was Ruth Garza. He gave us another person who would coordinate short-term teams, including Carol Oban, including Heraclio Conde. And I had a new focus or a more concentrated focus on mentoring, which was a quieter sort of thing to do physically. I had a moment when I went to Andres Garza and I said, I just can't keep up a big house anymore. I need to downsize. And he said, go on HMA. When you come back, we'll figure it out. So I packed up all my belongings and put them into storage for the first time in 15 years. And while I was gone, the people in leadership decided that we would have a Western movement, that it was time to start a Western hub. And I said, here I am, pick me, my bags are already packed. I can just go west. And pioneering, we came, and so God intervened with my illness and my exhaustion to start a new direction. And I came over here to a huge house, a whole lot of hospitality, and coordination of all the facilities that we use for our church planting movement in Durango. The world has changed enormously in the time that I came to Christ and to current day being on the field. First and foremost was a change in missions paradigms, which affected me from the day that I started raising support. My support came in very slowly. And then one day, Jay Kyle called me on the telephone and he said, Susan, I want to change you from the border ministry to Monterey. And as we talked about it, he explained that there was a change in missions paradigms, that the Americans were no longer going to be the church planters, that the Mexicans were going to take the lead on church planting, and that we Americans would be here supporting, encouraging, equipping, but not doing the actual church plant. That was a very significant change in missions that we adapted to on my first arrival to the work in Mexico. Following that, I'd say that the things that have been most impactful was the use of electronics. I arrived in Mexico with a computer, but no internet, no email, no cell phone, no interaction electronically with other people. Well, we had telephones, landlines, and so that first year, some of that we started getting into. And it came to a head with the year of COVID-19 lockdown, because everything became electronics dependent. Our worship services were broadcast. Our Bible studies were done through Zoom. Our biblical counseling with individuals was done on WhatsApp or on Facebook or some other electronic thing. And it's amazing that in our fear that people would just fade away and the church would disintegrate, has really resulted in stronger churches. We did lose some people who were not very committed in the first place, but those who really want to follow Christ made their way through the electronics. That was a huge change in the missions dynamics. Now, of course, we're doing a lot more we're doing a lot more face-to-face, but we have not eliminated the electronics as a means of reaching and caring for our congregations. The very, very most significant aspect of God, his person, who he is, his attribute, most significant as a theme in my life has been his sovereignty. When I still had not accepted Christ or come to know him, I wrote a paper out I made a sign for my home and office and desk drawer. Nothing happens by mistake. God has a plan. Okay, later I learned about Jesus and my salvation through faith in him, and he continues to surprise me all the time with his plan, how sovereign he is in every way that he prepared me for the field, in every way that he protects me on the field, in every way that he has sustained me, my support, my interaction with teammates and Mexicans, and every aspect of it. In the disheartening moments, it gives strength to look back on God is sovereign. He knows what he's doing. Jesus is worthy of whatever I'm going through. And in the end, Christ will reign and his kingdom will be exalted. I'd do this again in a heartbeat. When I went on my first short-term missions trip to the Yucatan, Mexico, the pastor that was leading the trip, Eric Pop, asked me in the airplane on the way home, would you do it again? And my answer, in a heartbeat. And sure enough, it was only a few years, 3 years before I came to the field long term.